Hi, my name is Ruth Ju-Shih Li. I'm a site-specific ephemeral artist, and I also make ceramic sculptures. I'm currently based in Sydney, Australia, and with a second studio in Jingdezhen, China. My practice is autobiographical in nature, and they give form to deeply personal meditations. And I love working with ceramics. Not only is it humble and mundane, organic, but it's also really universal. To me, it's cross-cultural, cross-class. Um, Everybody has something ceramic in their life, whether it's imperial porcelain, Jingdezhen porcelain, to I don't know, the IKEA cups we use every day for our cuppa or coffee, and also to terracotta chai cups on the street of Delhi. I feel like everybody has ceramic in their life. But also across mythologies from different cultures, and with the creation story, the most common material is actually clay, that humans are made and formed by deity or creator from clay. So I do feel like it is the most human material and the most universal. The self-portrait series were made in my studio in Jingdezhen pre-COVID, before the pandemic. I love Jingdezhen porcelain. It's this really beautiful cold white, but it's also really, really difficult to use. And which is why I have my studio in Jingdezhen, because they have the facilities to work with the characteristics, the unique characteristics of the clay, which is really different from how we would work with porcelain in Australia. The self-portrait series came first, and they were a way for me to explore abstract self-representation. So I made these like framed mirrors first, and having kind of my meditations or emotions translated into the work in a more direct way. And with the freestanding works, I feel like it came a couple of years later when I had a bit more confidence to go even more abstract. And my freestanding series were made in Sydney, Australia during the longest lockdown that Sydney saw. And I was struggling a lot with the Australian porcelain. It was actually quite straightforward and simple to use compared to Jingdezhen porcelain, but it wasn't achieving kind of the results that I was looking for in porcelain. So Australia has this really beautiful black clay, deep mineral rich matte black clay, and I just thought, oh, why struggle with Australian porcelain when I can just work with something that's beautiful and local and straight from the earth here. And so I switched completely and just left the porcelain and then moved on to this beautiful black clay and explored it approached it as a new material. And I really loved it. I really, really enjoy working with this clay, and almost exclusively work with this clay now that whenever I'm in Australia. My titles are quite abstract. They're usually an emotion or thought that kind of emerges while I'm making the work. It could arise from a situation that I'm currently facing, or a memory or anything like that. And that's how I embed kind of these emotions and the meditation into the work. So it's quite personal and doesn't always make sense directly outside the context of the meditation or the thoughts that came when I was making the work. So with my fired porcelain work and black clay work, it is kind of like a snapshot of my practice, in that sense that it's a little bit different in that the material has been transformed by fire to a more stable, relatively more stable state or condition. But what my practice in general explores is that everything is transitory, whether the ceramics has been fired or not. Just like us, we're here 1 minute, next we might not be, and all of this is part of nature. I think a lot of my work is about that. It's about shifting perspective. It's about coming out of our own thoughts and being stuck in our own perspective, and maybe stepping back and understanding that we're part of this big cycle. I use a lot of flora and fauna in my work, and it's the same reason why I use clay. Just symbolically, it is very universal. It's cross-culture. I feel like no matter where you're from, you can relate to kind of these natural symbols quite easily. But if you look closely, you'll see that all the flowers are not real. They're all fantastical flowers. That's because I'm trying to avoid the burden of flower language. So depending on which culture you're from, flowers mean very, very different things. So for example, chrysanthemums, in Australia, you know, we have these beautiful pink mamas that we give for Mother's Day. But in Chinese culture, chrysanthemums are funeral flowers, and you would never give them to your mother for Mother's Day, and vice versa with lilies, white lilies. They're a symbol of grace and elegance in Chinese culture, but they're a funeral flower in Australia. So in order to avoid misunderstanding, and in order for people to overcome that step and to engage with the work more readily, I use fantastical flowers. I love playing with space. I think as a site-specific installation artist, I like to work with the space as a whole to better engage my audience so they feel like they're immersed into the work. It's, to me, my work, what I try to improve all the time and do more research and development on is how I can make my work more engaging to and more accessible to different people. So with some of my installations, I have soundscapes. I'm very aware of the lighting for people who have sensory overload, to see how I can make my work more accessible to them as well. So I'm constantly thinking about how I can work with the space and how my work can work with the space too. And I guess I just like to play with different colors and to see how the different effect and emotions it can bring out in people, and how it changes the way people engage with the work as well. Yeah, I work quite instinctively. A lot of the times, especially when I make site-specific work as well, it's about being in the space and seeing what responds to you, or placing an object there, or hanging something in that corner, how the line sweeps across. It's all quite very much in the moment and instinctual. And I feel like with colors as well, I would get a lot of different samples and then imagine the space, like have the samples in the space, and then imagine how my work would engage with the color in this space. And I don't have a specific answer or formula. I also use a lot of fauna, so like birds, wings, claws, and that's because that comes from my spiritual practice and my faith, which comes from a Christian background. And I draw a lot of inspiration from biblical stories. So for example, specifically the Garden of Eden, which I feel like this story embodies kind of all the concepts I want to talk about, which is the creation of life, introduction of time and death. And I feel like the story explores all of these three. So I use a lot of symbols from the Garden of Eden and of Utopia to kind of communicate my concept. Yeah. I remember going to Jingdezhen for the first time as an artist, stepping foot on the mainland for the first time, and experiencing a lot of culture shock actually, and a lot of cultural and language barriers that I didn't expect to face. My parents, well, I was born in Taiwan and my parents were born in Taiwan, but two of my grandparents were from China. So in a sense, I do feel twice removed, maybe culturally, from China. But it's this really interesting kind of push and pull relationship with a foreign ancestral homeland. At times I'll experience like total culture shock, and sometimes a really strong familiarity would kind of hit me in the face. So having now my studio based in Jingdezhen and going back twice a year, that's more than anyone else in my family actually travels to China. So I'm kind of like learning about my foreign hometown, like relearning, re-understanding, re-getting to know in a way. But definitely my personal experiences, I was as a Taiwanese-Australian growing up in Australia, like intergenerational stories deeply inform my practice, inspire and push me forward to find more universal visual languages for my work, because I see the gaps between all the misunderstandings that can happen because of cultural differences. And it's made me, kind of living across three countries, have made me more sensitive to these things, which is really helpful for me in creating a more universal visual language. But also, like, I'm privileged as a site-specific artist to be able to travel a lot to make the work. Since I can't ship it, I have to ship myself. So I go over and I build the work on site, which means I get to have the opportunity to immerse myself in all sorts of different cultures and learn different languages and practices. And it's so beautiful and really informative as well. I learn a lot. and kind of fine tune that sensitivity about navigating culture, like cross culture, and helping me expand my vocabulary and refine my work so that I'm sure I say I use fantastical flowers in order to avoid misunderstanding, but maybe there's something else in my work that I'm not aware of yet that can still create misunderstanding. So I feel like as I travel and grow as an artist, it will feed and inform my work more and more, and I have more opportunity to kind of test my work with different people groups, but also different cultures and communities, and then be able to refine and grow from those experiences. It's actually funny because because my studio is in Jingdezhen and I make these elaborate floral forms that are very obviously not functional, I do get asked by a lot of craftsmen, local artists, and curators to say, oh, but you can't use this. And to me, that was a very interesting question because I would never get asked that in Australia. So strangely, in Jingdezhen, I get asked that because Jingdezhen has such a beautiful and long history rooted in functional ceramics. So that's really interesting. What I find the differentiation in Sydney is, and I have to be honest, I'm not in Sydney that often either, so maybe I'm not exposed to the art scene as much as maybe artists who lives there 12 months of the year. So that from what I can see, I think recently people have been more and more accepting of non-functional ceramics and seeing it more in through the art lens, if there even is one, and seeing more ceramics as a material, just like how bronze and maybe oil paints are. But there is, I would say, one distinctive differentiation, which is the price point. People often assume ceramics should be cheaper. I've heard a lot of things, and there are some very well-established ceramic artists in Australia, and their works are very reasonably priced, which I feel could be higher. But that's something I find interesting about Australia. People are more accepting of it as art form, but it's still a cheaper art form. Aesthetically, like form-wise, you can see that they look more close to my ephemeral work. I see them as my ephemeral work as an ongoing phenomenon, and these little freestanding fire ceramic work as like photographs of the work, like little snapshots capturing it.